We are back yet again, and this week is a busy week for us. I know normally we dive right into college basketball, but with the bracket coming out this week, March Madness about to start, we figured we'd give y'all just 2 episodes this week with how busy NFL free agency has been, with Major League Baseball had to start its regular season. So this right now is going to be your football free agency and the start of the MLB season preview, and then later today you'll get your full college basketball episode on everything you need to know for March Madness. But we're going to dive right in with some of the NFL free agent stuff we missed from last week because stuff just kept happening. It's been a crazy NFL free agency period. Just going to run down to the divisions right quick. Patriots re-signed Mike Onwenu, who's a very flexible offensive lineman, a guy that a lot of people didn't think they'd be able to bring back, but a good signing for them. Then the Jets, a big deal to Tyron Smith, a very good offensive tackle that really is something the Jets needed to shore up that offensive line.
Yeah, definitely. This has been a guy that's been a vet over the past few years for the Dallas Cowboys, been a sure tackle for them over there, but has had trouble staying on the field. And the Jets signing a player that has trouble staying on the field is not a great idea, especially when you're...
It's a perfect tackle for Aaron Rodgers.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Maybe they can keep both of these guys on the field since Rodgers already pretty much traded in his full season being out. Maybe he gets a few guaranteed seasons, and maybe Tyron Smith will help out with that. Hopefully. We'll see.
Hopefully. Then for the Dolphins, they signed Jordan Poyer to a 1-year deal, which kind of keeps with the theme of players going to rival teams, which we'll get into more a bit later. But it's been kind of weird to see that this free agency.
Super cheap deal, if I remember correctly. I thought
very
Poyer
cheap.
would get a lot more money than what he got, but
it's just age at this point, really. Even for a 1-year deal and being a safety with this new too-high shell look in the NFL, you're not going to pay safeties a lot nowadays. And speaking of not giving up a lot for people, the Steelers acquiring Justin Fields for a conditional 6th-round pick next year.
Yeah, it kind of shows how out of touch I am in terms of player value. I thought Fields would command a much greater haul for the Bears, but kind of shows that they had absolutely no leverage in this situation, as all signs were kind of pointing to them taking Caleb Williams all along, and other NFL teams knew that, and so they weren't really going to pay as much for a guy like Justin Fields. And I just think it's crazy that he is going to a team in the Steelers that have already signed presumably their guy moving forward in Russell Wilson. That's definitely going to be an interesting dynamic, and I'm interested to see if Justin Fields finds his way onto the field in 2024.
Yeah, the Steelers have specifically said that there will not be a QB battle. It's Russell Wilson's job, and Fields is there to back him up, which is wild to me. I love Fields out of the draft, and I still think he has potential to be a good player, although if you're the Bears, I definitely would take Caleb Williams or Drake May at 1 instead of keeping Fields at this point, even purely for the contract value. But the Steelers weren't done trading there, as they traded Deontay Johnson to the Panthers for Dante Jackson, and there was also a pick swap in that deal. This one is a bit weird to me, honestly.
Yeah, and just what I think of right off the bat, obviously this is not how it works, but just imagine if Carolina had not sold their soul for the first pick in which they drafted Bryce Young. They could have all these weapons. I say all these weapons. They could have a pretty solid receiver room for maybe even a guy like Caleb Williams this season. Obviously, their pick going to the Bears. But this trade, I feel like, benefits the Panthers more than it does the Steelers. Don't know too much about Dante Jackson, but Deontay Johnson definitely the best that the Panthers will have this season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know it's a meme about Deontay Johnson never finds the end zone, but this dude is still a really good route runner at this point in his career, although apparently the Steelers got rid of him because he was a bad influence on George Pickens. I don't know if you know much about George Pickens, but what in the world is going on there with Steelers receivers? First Antonio Brown, now George Pickens. I thought Deontay Johnson was the calm one, but apparently not. They're all just crazy over there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I would have thought that Pickens was the bad influence on his other teammates, even being as young as he is. He's kind of a menace to society. I kind of like the George Pickens memes over the years, especially him staring at the TV on draft night. That was pretty funny.
But that wasn't it for the AFC North, as the Bengals signed Zach Moss to a 2-year deal to replace Joe Mixon, who left in free agency. And then another team that was super active, the Ravens, signing Derrick Henry to a 2-year, $16 million contract. And with this Baltimore run game, I think that is very scary for other teams, especially considering how good the Ravens were just last season.
Yeah, I wonder if they can even incorporate kind of a zone read scheme with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. That could be pretty scary for front seven defenses to defend against. Got to load up the box against Henry, but then you also got to respect Lamar Jackson's ability to get out of there pretty quickly. So I think this is a pretty interesting signing for the Ravens just because of how strong their run game has already been in the past, and then you're signing a guy like Derrick Henry who's obviously been a dominant force in his prime.
Yeah, and then losing one of your inside linebackers, Patrick Queen, who goes across division again to the Steelers on a 3-year, $41 million deal. So I don't know what it is with players as free agency. It just felt like there were a lot of players that went right from one division rival to the other. So it's going to be an interesting few months for these NFL fans coming into next season.
That Steelers defense looking great, too.
Yeah, that was one hole they really had was the inside linebacker spot, especially with the injury to Cole Holcomb. So I love this signing for him. Queen isn't really a true Mike, in my opinion, but he's super athletic. You saw him flourish next to a player like Roquan Smith, and I think he can do that in Pittsburgh as well. Then the Texans, super busy free agency. A signing that we actually released a short on a few days ago because it was so big at the time was Danielle Hunter signing a 2-year, $49 million deal that guarantees all but $1 million of that. And this is a super elite pass rusher who we always thought every year he's going to get moved, and this year he finally does, ending up on the Texans, swapping directions with Jonathan Grenard, who went from Houston to Minnesota.
Yeah, I just think automatically of having Danielle Hunter on the opposite side of Will Anderson rushing the quarterback, and all of a sudden I really do not envy NFL quarterbacks that face Houston. Those are two guys that I would not want chasing me down.
Yeah.
Obviously a big deal for both sides. Danielle Hunter getting paid pretty well. A guy that I was hoping my Falcons might consider signing in free agency, but this a very expensive deal. Great for Danielle Hunter, obviously, and he's going to continue to impact the game in the NFL now for the Texans rather than the Vikings, though.
Yeah, a lot of other good signings for the Texans, too. Really getting Azeez Al-Shire teaming back up as an off-ball linebacker with his former defensive coordinator in San Francisco, D'Amico Ryans. A contract I really like is the Jeff Okudah deal. I think he still has potential. Hasn't been great so far, but sometimes these corners take a while to develop, and he showed flashes playing less on the boundary last year, so I think if this is a guy you really let make a home for himself in the slot, he can turn into a pretty decent player for you. And then acquiring Joe Mixon for a 7th-round pick from the Bengals, I guess they decided it wasn't even worth the bag of chips, so gave him a 7th-rounder, which in my mind is worth even less, because you know those good bags of Doritos can really hit sometimes.
Especially Cool Ranch, man.
Cool Ranch, man, the spicy nacho is where it's at. Come on, what are we talking about? Cool Ranch is good, but it is not 1A. Cool Ranch is 1B on my draft board, and this is no discussion.
That's fair. I can get behind that.
Staying in the AFC South, over to the Colts, one really massive deal that we didn't talk about. Obviously, we touched on the Michael Pittman deal last week, but this week, Kenny Moore re-signed on a 3-year, $30 million deal. This is a guy that's an elite nickel corner, one of the best in the league, and to lock him up on what's a pretty expensive deal for a nickel corner is, I think, still a good move for Indy, is they're not making a lot of noise outside their own team. They're just signing their own guys, and I really like it.
Yeah, and corners in this division going to prove to be very valuable with all the weapons that teams like Tennessee and Jacksonville have continued to acquire. So great deal for the Colts. They're going to need their defense to be able to stop the passing game of these other teams with young quarterbacks and good receivers.
Yeah, and you talking about weapons signing for the Titans. They went out and grabbed a good old 27,000-year-old rusty sword and Calvin Ridley on a 4-year, $92 million deal with $50 million guaranteed. This is a guy that, although he showed flashes with Jacksonville, I still don't know if he is a bona fide number one receiver at this point in his career. Then over 30-year-old DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is still a great jump ball guy, but outside of that, he's just not as athletic as he used to be. So the not as athletic as they once were receiver room is really being built up there in Tennessee. And they got more help on the offense with Lloyd Cushenberry to play center, a guy that I'm very familiar with, Kenneth Murray, for the linebacker core, which, good luck, he's all athlete, not much else. And then Chidobe Awuzie to play corner on another solid signing. So Tennessee very active, although I don't know how much they actually improved.
Yeah, and going back to Ridley, I just, more than anything, find it funny in terms of Jacksonville because it almost seemed like they were trying to screw the Falcons out of a second-round pick. Obviously, that conditional deal with it turning into a second-round pick if they re-sign Ridley before he hit the open market, but a third-round pick if they signed him after he hit the open market. I think Jacksonville really wanted to bring him back, but once Ridley hit the open market, he got a call with some dollar signs attached to it from Tennessee, and then he was like, later, guys, and
all I'm saying is the Vegas odds to Tennessee were much higher than Jacksonville, and we know Calvin Ridley's off-field habits, so I guess you can never really
might have secured a nice payday there.
You never know. Ralvin Kidley was, in unrelated news, paid a $30,000 payout on DraftKings the very next day.
Ralvin Kidley football at gmail.com. Let's go.
Yes. He just keeps racking up money.
That's right.
Oh, man. Then out to the AFC West, the Broncos signing safety Brandon Jones, former Miami Dolphin. Pretty good role player, but a guy that I don't know is going to be your Justin Simmons replacement, a guy that they let walk, but we'll see what happens there. And then on to my team, the Los Angeles Chargers, where the team is on fire, the defense is on fire, the offense is on fire, and everything is on fire because we're in hell. It's very bad right now. Keenan Allen traded to the Bears for a fourth-round pick, and I know it's not a good return. I hate the return. The issue is the Chargers have less leverage than me on a seesaw with Trent Williams right now. There is just nothing they can do at all, so you have to let Keenan Allen go for that. You have to release Mike Williams, and it's just pain.
Yeah, do you have any experience catching passes? Because I think the Chargers are holding open tryouts next week, and maybe a super fan like you might hold a better chance of getting signed to a 10-day or something like that.
Listen, I can't catch, but neither can Quentin Johnston, so maybe they'll take me anyway.
And you're a lot cheaper. You're a lot cheaper, so they might as well just release Quentin Johnston, hire and sign Micah Farmer to a much cheaper deal for the same production.
I'll play for $1 million a year, guys. I only need $1 million a year. That's super cheap. I can be a good special teamer, get absolutely pancaked trying to block for Darius Davis. I can get out on the field. I have so much heart, first guy in, last guy out type of guy,
Type of guy you'd let your daughter date, to be honest.
I don't know about that. Not a lot of luck on that front so far. But also for the Chargers, picking up 2 tight ends, Will Dissly, Hayden Hurst, just some good depth, good Jim Harbaugh offense type of guys, as is Gus Edwards. They signed to a 2-year, $6.5 million deal. Then bring in Poona Ford for the D-line. I like that pickup. I think he's a pretty good fit. And then I love the Alohi Gilman re-signing. I'm a big Alohi Gilman guy. Love him over the top for the Chargers, so super excited about that. What I'm not excited about, though, is the Chiefs adding speed at receiver.
Yeah, and before we move on to the Chiefs, I just want to address something that I've seen on Twitter. There's absolutely no legs to the rumors that Herbert's going to get traded and McCarthy's going to get drafted by Harbaugh. I'm tired of seeing that on Twitter. Can you just squash that?
In no world do you trade a top 7 NFL quarterback, which is what Justin Herbert is, despite what some people may say. In no world do you trade that guy for a guy who is at best QB4 in a draft class. That is ludicrous. It is stupid. And if the Chargers do it, which I think there's a 0% chance they do, not 0.001, 0. I think if they somehow do that, I'm converting fandoms instantly. I quit. I'm jumping off a building. I'm burning every jersey I have. It's all over.
But I was just making sure because I have seen those ramblings on Twitter, not from anything credible, but just something to talk about.
Is that the CT ESPN account going crazy again?
Could be. They've been on a Linsanity run these last couple weeks. I've been seeing them go viral.
Indeed.
But yeah, Hollywood Brown to the Chiefs finally got some more speed back at receiver. Obviously, a guy that has struggled in the past few years, was pretty solid initially in the NFL, but honestly, Patrick Mahomes will take all the help he can get at the wide receiver position after all the instability at the receiver position last year. Obviously, Rashee Rice had a nice season, but everybody else was kind of just mid. And I think Hollywood Brown's kind of mid too, but he's less mid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is a great upgrade for a team whose deep threat last year was MVS, who has bricks for hands. Marquise Brown doesn't have the best hands in the world, but they're much better than MVS. That's all I can say for that. So I hate the signing as a Chargers fan, but if you're a Chiefs fan, I think you're going to be really happy with this, especially on just a one-year prove-it deal. I think it's a great idea for Kansas City. Then the Cowboys, a team that made a lot of their fans mad after saying they were going all in this offseason. You know, all in is not Eric Kendricks and Jordan Lewis on one-year deals and a long snapper. That's like you put $5 in, and if you win, you're happy with it. That is terrible from the Cowboys.
Yeah, insert Skip Bayless's tweet here, which we probably cannot put on the screen for
Let's just
content.
say a comma saved a life.
Yeah, commas save lives, folks. Make sure your grammar and punctuation is up to par, or you could be in some serious trouble. Thankfully, Skip Bayless, in expressing his frustration, did not say something incredibly profane, let's say.
Yeah, that would have been bad.
But yeah, I'm not sure what the Cowboys are doing. Jerry Jones is getting a little too old, and if he wants to see another Super Bowl win before he dies, he needs to get moving. And Eric Kendricks and Jordan Lewis are not going to push that needle.
No, there were so many players I thought were great fits for the Cowboys in this free agency too. I thought Sean Murphy-Bunting would have been great for them. I would have loved Patrick Queen to the Cowboys. I think he would have been great for their system. Heck, Daniil Hunter, get you an absolute stud on the other side of Micah Parsons. I know DeMarcus Lawrence is still a good player, but you can never have enough high-level edge rushers, so I think any one of those players would have been great for them. And even re-signing Tyron Smith, you look at the money that the Jets gave him. I know the Cowboys have money. I mean, it just doesn't feel like Jerry is really committed, despite what he says.
And then their first-round draft pick from last year, Mozzie Smith, ended up not doing too much for them.
Yeah, you really draft that guy as a pure run stopper, and while he was okay in that role, he doesn't offer any pass rush, so not really a guy you want to be running out there every play.
Definitely head-scratching activities going on in Dallas, for sure.
For sure. Moving on to the Giants, they made a couple questionable moves, and all their fans are pretty depressed after Saquon Barkley left, after Xavier McKinney left. You know how you make your fans less depressed? You go out and grab an absolute stud, and that's what they did in getting Brian Burns from the Panthers, along with a 2024 fifth in exchange for a second and a fifth this year as well, and a 2025 conditional fifth-rounder. Then the Giants immediately extended him to a 5-year deal worth up to $150 million with $76 million fully guaranteed. I absolutely love this if you're the Giants. Kayvon Thibodeau started to break out last year, and now you had an absolute stud in Brian Burns on the other side. That's a great edge duo right there.
And not to mention all-pro inside Dexter Lawrence. They just signed him to a big deal as well, and man, that is a pretty scary defensive line, excuse me.
Well, their offensive line is also scary, just in a different way.
Just in the opposite way. Not sure what they're going to do on offense at all, but maybe that front seven can score some touchdowns via scoop and scores, strip sacks, stuff like that.
You hope going against Brian Burns in practice helps Evan Neal develop a little bit, who's been a bit of a turnstile in pass protection thus far. Yeah. Then they also signed Devin Singletary. That's your Saquon Barkley replacement, though he's not the same level. He's a serviceable back for sure, pretty good. And then also Drew Lock, the Danny Dimes replacement, as I'm sure the Giants are regretting that contract big time right now. Then as far as their division rival, the Eagles, obviously the Saquon Barkley signing, 3 years, almost $38 million, $25.5 guaranteed. That's a lot for a running back, but when you're as good as the Eagles are, I think you can afford to do that.
Yeah, and Saquon Barkley getting a really good offensive line to run behind, and Jason Kelce, I saw clips of Jason Kelce this past week, halfway regretting his decision to retire with a guy like Saquon Barkley as an addition for the Eagles. They're definitely looking pretty scary on the offensive side if Jalen Hurts can get things figured out with his interceptions and things of that nature. But Saquon Barkley, definitely a huge signing for the Eagles.
I mean, I don't think we have to worry about Jalen Hurts' interceptions anymore. They got Kenny Pickett.
True. Kenny Two Gloves is going to save the day.
Yes. Got him for the Steelers along with a 2024 fourth for a 2024 third and 2 7th-round picks in 2025. So,
two bags
absolute
of chips.
Blockbuster. Yes, 2 bags of chips. They got the spicy nacho and the Cool Ranch. They're loaded there in Pittsburgh now. Then they also picked up Devontae Parker and extended Landon Dickerson, 2 pretty savvy moves. But then my favorite move they made all offseason is the signing of edge rusher Bryce Huff to a 3-year, $51 million contract. This is a guy who a lot of people might not know. He's a DPR, designated pass rusher, but he is elite in that role. And I don't mean like top 15. I mean top 5. As a pure designated pass rusher, he is top 5 in the NFL. And it's sad because no one really knows it because he's he's just purely a third down player for the Jets, has been over the last couple seasons because of their front 7 rotation over there. But this is a guy that I think is going to make a major difference in pass rush downs for the Eagles, which is something that they'll greatly benefit from with how poor that secondary has been at times.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of them shopping around Hassan Reddick. If they manage to hold on to him while locking up Bryce Huff as they've done here, that's a pretty scary pass rush duo as well, rushing the quarterback. Then as well on the defense, signing linebacker Devin White to a 1-year, $7.5 million deal, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson signing to a 3-year deal worth up to $33 million.
Yeah, those are 2 more good signings. Devin White, big athlete, not so much a technician at this point in his career, but I think he can improve on that. And then Gardner-Johnson is going to be your disruptor, instigator in the secondary that can also play at a pretty high level. Moving on to the Commanders, they signed Marcus Mariota. I know, what a big signing. Everyone's super excited to hear about Marcus Mariota, but I think this deal is important because it hints at maybe they're trying to draft a quarterback with a similar play style. And if you look at this year's draft, who stands out immediately in that? It's Jaden Daniels. Because if you're not going to be in play at 1, which obviously not anymore that the Bears have traded Justin Fields, they're probably taking Caleb Williams. So even though I personally would take Drake May at 1 in this draft, which is a whole other conversation for later, I think that the Commanders are probably going to end up taking Jaden Daniels now based on this signing.
Yeah, and you wonder if any of that has to do with the fact that they don't really want to try their luck with another UNC quarterback in Drake May after.
Well, you know what they say, scout the helmet, not the player. I mean, oh wait, that's not it, is it?
Well, I don't know. I think that might be a little bit of a factor. White quarterback from UNC, another white quarterback from UNC. Obviously, Drake May is a much better prospect, but I just wonder
Drake
if
May
that
is
has
a
anything
white
to do
years
with
better
it at
than
all.
either Mitch Trubisky or Sam Howell were his prospects. It's
very true.
I think Drake May is going through Justin Herbert syndrome right now, where he's just a elite accuracy passer, and these people are like, that's kind of boring. He doesn't really do much outside of the play. Played behind a terrible offensive line. He's not that good. But I think he's going to show that he is amazing once he gets to the league. And he has practice playing behind a terrible offensive line, so if the Commanders do draft him, he'll already have that going for him. But he'll also have some help out of the backfield, though not much, because they decided to sign Austin Eckler to a 2-year deal worth up to $11.3 million. And this is a guy that, as a Chargers fan, he's done. He has bricks for feet. He is so slow. He cannot run in between the tackles at all. He's a good receiving back, but as a pure runner, you're not going to get much out of him. So I would expect for Brian Robinson to remain the lead bell cow back for the Commanders and Eckler to be your third down guy out of the backfield.
Yeah, listen, good on this new GM and new ownership on opening up the pocketbook. It's just a lot of guys signing that you would probably more likely find on the 2018 or 2019 Pro Bowl rosters than even
Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner as well.
Exactly. Than even being close to being major needle pushers in the year 2024. I like the fact that they're willing to spend money, but I'm not too sure I like who they're spending it on so far.
Yeah, they also picked up Frankie Louvu, who's a pretty good DPR type guy, and then Jeremy Chin, who is a very athletic safety that can also play in the box, a good Cam Curl replacement and a better athlete than Cam Curl as well. Then the Bears, obviously you have the Keenan Allen trade and the Justin Fields trade. They obviously won the Keenan Allen trade, but I don't know about this Justin Fields trade at this point. I think that if Caleb Williams hits, which I know he's supposedly such an amazing prospect, quarterback's the hardest position to hit on in the draft. There still is possibility he flops. If he does hit, I think this is a great trade for the Bears to at least get anything back. If he doesn't hit, I'm still not sure that I hate it, honestly, because Justin Fields only had 1 year left where you would have to sign him to what's probably a $50 million a year extension, maybe, if he started playing well. So I don't hate the decision at all. Obviously, you wish you could have got more back, but I don't think it's too bad, all in all.
Yeah, Caleb Williams definitely going to walk into a probably as good of a situation as a quarterback prospect, especially as high as he's going to go, obviously a number one, has walked into, at least as long as I can remember in my lifetime. Just immediately he's going to step in with weapons, with proven experience, and just an improved roster as a whole. I really like what the Bears are doing, other than, obviously, I'm not a big fan of Eberflus.
Yeah, I think one thing, too, that people aren't talking about enough is these two good young tackles, Braxton Jones on the left side and Darnell Wright on the right side, who I think are both doing a lot better than they get credit for sometimes, so shout out to them as well. Then staying in the NFC North, the Lions, good deal to DJ Reader, 2-year deal worth $27.25 million, and him and Aleem McNeil as a duo, that's a elite run-stopping force up front there in Detroit. Those are Dan Campbell's type of guys.
For sure. Reader, a Clemson University graduate. That's a fun fact for you. And he's had a good career, mainly for the Bengals in the NFL. Pretty good signing for the Lions, I feel like.
Yeah, and they just kept signing guys from our alma maters. They went out and got Carlton Davis, a War Eagle, in a trade with the Buccaneers, along with a 6th-round pick in 2024 and 2025 in exchange for a 2024 third. This is a guy who's good when he's on the field, but he's almost never on the field, and that's really as simple as that can get. Then the Packers, two big signings for them. Got Josh Jacobs on a 4-year, $48 million deal. That's your Aaron Jones replacement. I like Josh Jacobs a lot. I think there's not really a ton to say about that. Just new, good running back. It's going to get you a lot of work done. Then Xavier McKinney over the top, I also like a lot. Although 4 years, $68 million is a bit rich for my blood, but I still think these are two good sightings.
Yeah, for sure. And I almost feel bad for Aaron Jones, because if I'm Aaron Jones in this situation, I almost feel like I got cheated on for a younger, prettier girl, you know?
Well, why do you think he went to the Vikings? He's going to try to get his revenge this season. On that 1-year, $7 million deal, he's going right back in Green Bay. So we'll see what happens there. But I don't know how much you're going to win if Sam Darnold is your quarterback, which if they can't trade up for one in the draft, that's who it's going to be on this 1-year deal that he signed. So don't love that. I do love the Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel signings, two great edge players. Both, I think, severely underrated. They're two very, very solid players off the edge. So like those signings from Minnesota.
Yeah, looking a little bleak in Minnesota right now. Definitely in full rebuild
Well, that's
mode.
just the weather.
And you almost got to wonder if Justin Jefferson's time there is limited, if he's going to find a new home.
There is
sometime in the
no
near
way they
future.
trade away. That guy's the face of their franchise. If they trade him, I would be absolutely shocked.
Yeah, but I don't know. If they don't improve that quarterback situation the next couple of years, he's definitely going to want out, for sure.
Yeah, that is the issue there. Speaking of improving the quarterback situation, it is the Atlanta Falcons, who we talked about signing Kirk Cousins last week, but they're getting him some help too. Darnell Mooney, a pretty good deep threat, a little bit questionable hands, and then Rondale Moore, a very good slot threat with pretty questionable hands. So two interesting short receivers to go after here. I think they both have upside, and then for Rondale Moore, they shipped off Desmond Ridder to Arizona, said, "We are done with you. Please never come back ever again."
Yes! Yes! Let's go. I never want to
know
watch
you were happy
Ridder
about
play.
that one.
I never want to watch Ridder play quarterback ever in the NFL in my lifetime. In the history of life, I am very done watching him. I'm very glad that he is off my team, and I like the Mooney signing a lot. I still think the Falcons need to pick up a receiver in the draft, either in the 2nd or the 3rd round. I'd really like a guy like Ladd McConkey or Ricky Pearsall. And I think these two signings and the lack of signing an edge really mean that the Falcons are honing in on an edge with that number 8 overall pick.
And it's Jared Verse.
From what I've been told,
Verse.
it is Jared Verse, and it is not going to be Dallas Turner, which was the rumor for many months in Atlanta. Once they got locked in there at number 8, a lot of people were thinking Dallas Turner, but all signs are pointing to Jared Verse, and I think Micah has a little bit of information to tell you why it's Jared Verse.
Yeah, so you look at the Raheem Morris defense the last few years, and when he was on the Rams last season, a Raheem Morris defense finally took an edge rusher in the first 3 rounds, and it was Byron Young out of Tennessee. And it's going to be up on the screen here, but if you look at the RAS scores of Byron Young and Jared Verse and their physical size, they're pretty darn close to the exact same player. So I think in this Raheem Morris system, he loved what he was able to get out of Byron Young. And if you can get that kind of production out of a Byron Young, what can you get out of Jared Verse? So I love that fit for the Falcons. The more and more I look at it, I think that's going to be the pick at 8.
Yeah, absolute stud. Falcons would be very fortunate to get him there at 8, but I think that's who they're honing in on for sure.
Yeah, then as far as the Panthers, they signed 2 offensive guards, Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis, gave each of them way too much money. 5 years, $100 million for Robert Hunt, who has been okay in Miami, which is, I mean, I know you got to protect Bryce Young, but that is insane to me. Then Damian Lewis,
Well, if they have a
4
pulse,
years,
it can't be much
$53
worse than what they had.
I mean, that's true, but still, that's so expensive. So expensive.
Yeah, it seems like Tepper's just kind of throwing money at offensive linemen to maybe satisfy the disgruntled fan base over there in Charlotte.
I think the only way he's going to satisfy that fan base is quitting immediately.
Sell the team.
Yes. Then obviously
And
you
stop
picked up
throwing
Deontay
drinks on
Johnson.
people.
Yes, don't do that either. That's
Not
frowned
cool.
upon.
Very bad.
Then the Cardinals, they got Sean Murphy-Bunting. I like the signing a lot. This is an Arizona team that has almost no corners, so to get a pretty serviceable guy like Murphy-Bunting, I like a lot. It's a 3-year, $25.5 million deal. Good price point, too, in my opinion. Then you get defensive tackle Bilal Nichols to help out, then 2 pretty decent off-ball linebackers in Mac Wilson and Chris Barnes. So under the radar, but pretty good signings down in Arizona, I think. Then the big news out of the NFC West this offseason is Aaron Donald has retired.
Yes. Obviously a legend, one of the best defensive linemen of all time, one of the most dominant for sure. And if he ever wants to come out of retirement and come play for his old defensive coordinator, we will welcome him with open arms over here in Atlanta. But all jokes aside...
Or if he wants to stay in L.A., play for the other L.A. team,
For sure.
I'd be down with that too.
All jokes aside, salute to Aaron Donald on a great career and just solidifying himself as one of the great defensive linemen of all time.
Yeah, but the retirement was not the only thing that happened to the Rams this offseason. They also signed 2 offensive guards, Kevin Dodson and Jonah Jackson. 2 really solid players. I think they got them at good prices as well. And then they brought back Darius Williams from Jacksonville. He left after winning a Super Bowl, had some fun down in Florida, and is now back in Los Angeles. I love that signing. I know it's going to be a different defensive coordinator, but he played well last time he was here, so I guess you hope it works out the same way. But then my favorite signing they made is Cam Curl from the Washington Commanders, bringing him in on a 2-year deal worth up to $13 million. This isn't a freaky athlete at safety. He's actually pretty slow, but he's an elite box player. He's going to kind of move around down there, going to be elite in the box. Think about John Johnson, what he did when he was in L.A. I think Cam Curl is that style of player, but at an even higher level, so I like this signing a lot.
And then over to the 49ers, linebacker Devondre Campbell signing a 1-year deal.
Yeah, pretty solid signing out there. He's a decent off-ball linebacker, played well for the Packers for a few years and the Cardinals, so could be pretty decent for them. And then finally the Seahawks, signing Jerome Baker, 1-year, $7 million deal. Like this signing a lot. Super athletic linebacker. I think he's going to fit this system well. The Mike McDonald system now out there in Seattle, so I like that. And then what I might like even more is Sam Howell coming to town in a trade with the Washington Commanders, along with a 2024 4th, 6th, in exchange for a 2024 3rd and 5th. I still think Sam Howell could be a pretty decent quarterback in the NFL. The Washington offensive line was one of the worst in football, and when Terry McLaurin was out, you don't have a lot else to throw to other than Curtis Samuel. So I think he still has upside. This is a pretty decent offensive line and a great receiving core in Seattle, so I'm curious to see what Sam Howell can do. I know he's probably going to be the backup for Geno Smith, but if he gets a shot, I think he could play pretty well.
Yeah, I think it might benefit him to at least initially sit behind Geno Smith for a little bit. Just get some not reps, but just some experience as a backup learning behind a veteran like Geno Smith. And I think that could benefit him in the future, and definitely a guy that I'm not out on and could definitely take strides. And once Geno Smith is ready to hang up the cleats, maybe a guy that could step in and be the guy that leads the Seahawks into the future with this great receiver room, like you mentioned.
But that is it for football and free agency this week, and now we move into some actual MLB talk for the first time in a little bit, as Dylan Cease has been traded to the Padres in exchange for right-handed pitcher Drew Thorpe, who was the number 5 prospect in San Diego's system, outfielder Samuel Zavala, who was number 7 in their system, and then a right-handed pitcher Jairo Iriarte, who was their number 8, and right-handed pitcher Steven Wilson, who was not inside the top 10. So not quite the haul that Chicago would have wanted for Cease, but I still think those are some good prospects to get back. You notice a lot of pitchers coming in on that deal, so I think the White Sox are really trying to build up their rotation in the farm system, really get some good younger arms in there, as that's something they really don't have a lot of right now. But I like this deal for San Diego. I think that Cease is a good pitcher. I don't know that he's elite, but I think he's really good.
Oh, yeah, definitely really good, and a guy that I really wanted to be traded to Atlanta before I heard what the asking price was for the White Sox. Obviously, they didn't end up getting that haul that they wanted, but with the Braves getting Chris Sale, that was no longer really a need for the Braves, and I'm a really big fan of Dylan Cease and his stuff. I think he's a very similar player to Spencer Strider, which would have been a fun combo in Atlanta. But
yeah, they're very similar players, actually.
Super excited for the Padres to get him, and I think he's going to be obviously a front of the rotation guy for them.
Definitely agree with that. Then some spring training news is, normally we wouldn't read into spring training too much, just let all the players have fun, but I think this is important to touch on. It's Yoshinobu Yamamoto looking pretty rough so far for a guy that got paid as much as he did. In 3 appearances, he's 0-1 with an 8.38 ERA and 9.2 innings. Does have 14 strikeouts in those 9.2 innings, but his whip is sitting at 1.97, which is just astronomically high.
Yeah, I was telling people all along when he first came over from Japan that his numbers, I will say, were incredibly impressive in Japan. He obviously has the talent to be incredible even in Major League Baseball. But these players in Japan just do not hold a candle to these players in Major League Baseball. And we're kind of getting a taste of that. While it is spring training and a lot of this stuff is likely experimental for Yamamoto that's leading to his troubles, maybe working on specific pitches, hitting specific spots at certain times, and maybe even just trying to throw certain pitches for strikes and getting killed that way. But this transition is not going to be as seamless as I think a lot of people were initially expecting, and I think that's why the FanGraphs win projections for the Dodgers were even lower than the Braves, which was not expected by many of the, I would say, quote-unquote, casual MLB fan after seeing all that they did this offseason.
I think you're definitely going to see Yamamoto figure it out as the season goes along. I think he's too talented to not figure it out, but it's just a question of how long that takes, I think.
Yeah, I just don't think he's a guy that steps in and is immediately Shohei Ohtani.
No, definitely not.
Right.
It's a lot to ask of someone to immediately be Shohei Ohtani in any regard.
Yeah, it just seems like that's what some of the expectations were from Dodgers fans and from MLB fans of just the league in general.
I will say, though, he's not the only new Japanese pitcher this year, and a guy for the Cubs who they have, Shogo Imanaga, looks pretty good so far in spring training, so maybe he might be the best import from Japan this season on the mound. Who knows?
Yeah, only time will tell.
We are going to get into our AL Division picks this week with opening day only 2 weeks out. I know we're both super excited for that and ready to get into it, and it's time to start with the AL West, actually. We're going to do the opposite. I know a lot of people start in the AL East, but since we live in the East, we figured we would go out there and then bring it back this way, mostly so we can get the Athletics out of the way and never have to talk about them ever again. So, with that said, who do you have finishing 5th in the AL West?
Give me the Oakland A's. I think this is pretty much, you can Sharpie this one in. You don't even have to pencil it in. Oakland's just tank city right now. They're ready to move to Vegas. They're not really going to ever contend in Oakland ever again. Sorry, Oakland fans.
Yeah,
the only bright spot in Oakland, obviously, Zach. How do you pronounce his last name? Gelof?
I think so. It's Gelof.
Gelof. It's a lot easier to just type out than it is.
For next week.
It's a lot easier to just type out than it is to say. They do have a young catcher in Shea Langolers, who is a highly touted prospect. And then who I learned is not a young guy in Brent Rooker. He's a guy that's going to only be in his second season as a full-time starter.
But he's almost 30 already.
He has shown flashes, but he's 29, and I was very shocked to learn that. That shows how in touch I am with the AL West over there. But not much is going to be going right for Oakland this season, and honestly, just get them to Vegas already.
Yeah, I also have them in 5th, but I have a lot of the same points as you on these bright spots for Geloff and Langoliers. And then, as far as Rooker, I honestly think he's traded at the deadline this season. There were talks of it happening last year, and I think there's going to be a team who's going to need power, especially versus lefties with all the good lefty bullpen arms you have right now in the league for postseason runs. So I really think that Rooker finds himself on a different team by the time we reach the postseason this year.
And that would be wise because if you can get literally anything for him, he's obviously not a guy that you're going to build around in the future if he's already 29. So
for sure.
I think that would definitely be wise for Oakland. You're not going to get a great return on that, but if you can get a young prospect or two to hopefully develop and maybe be ready by the time you're in Vegas, maybe a couple of years post relocation, I think that would be a really wise move.
I definitely agree with that. Then in 4th place for me, you're going to have the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim and Los Angeles of Angels Anaheim, or whatever they're called. And really all you have left is Mike Trout. Anthony Rendon doesn't play baseball anymore. Shohei Ohtani has left in free agency and is now cross town on the Dodgers, and Trout's probably going to play 60 games and then get injured, and it's going to be real sad, and they're going to lose a bunch of games. And the only reason they're not going to be last is because the A's exist.
Yeah, give me the Angels to finish in 4th as well. Obviously, no Ohtani, and honestly, that doesn't make that big of a difference because you weren't winning with Ohtani anyway, so just imagine how hard it's going to be to win without him. And that Anthony Rendon contract, man, is just every year it gets worse and worse to look at. He was a really solid player in Washington on that World Series team, but as soon as I saw the money that he was getting from the Angels, I thought that was a terrible deal, and they are proving me right with that one. And I just don't think he's really checked into baseball all the way. He had some interesting comments this week in the media that are circulating about that are really making me question how invested he is in being successful at this baseball game.
Yeah, you never really know with Rendon. It's always really weird all the time.
For sure. And coming in 3rd, this might surprise some people. Give me the World Series defending champion Rangers coming in 3rd place in what is a very top-heavy AL West division. I think this is a very solid team with guys like Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer that are going to start the season on the IL. Their starting pitching depth is a big question mark to me. Even if these guys get back, I think they'll be a shell of themselves later on. And then a little bit of this is just going to be World Series regression, World Series hangover type deal. Obviously, you've got a great offense still. Corey Seager, Josh Jung, Adolis Garcia. The list just goes on and on and on with that lineup. But I think the pitching is just going to be too much to overcome in a division with the Mariners and the Astros.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. I also have the Rangers at 3rd. This World Series hangover we keep talking about, but the savior is coming down the pipe, and his name is Wyatt Langford. The dude is tearing it up in spring training. As a Florida Gator fan, this is a guy that I absolutely love. He was a beast for the Gators for years. So I don't think he's going to play the full season in MLB. Obviously, he's not going to be on the MLB team for opening day, but I think that he does find himself in the MLB late in the season, but I think the Rangers will want to save that year of MLB service for next year. So I don't see him in the Rookie of the Year running this year. I definitely think he'll win it next year. I think he's an absolute stud. But as far as the actual Rangers, like you said, this rotation is a big question mark. Can they stay healthy? Jacob deGrom, man. I love watching Jacob deGrom pitch. He's one of my favorite players to watch, and I wish he could stay healthy, but he just never can. And I don't really see why that would change at this point in his career.
Yeah, kind of one of those things that you got to see it to believe it, and we have not seen a healthy deGrom for a full season in quite some time, and I don't think I don't think this is the season that we're going to get it even when he gets back. Obviously going to miss some time to begin the season, but when he does get back, I don't think he's going to be nearly as good as he's been in the past.
Yeah. Then at second for me, it is the Houston Astros. This is a very, very complete roster, very good from top to bottom. One thing I'm super excited about with them this year is a full season of Yainer Diaz behind the plate. I think he's much better than Martin Maldonado as an all-around player. Maldonado is a great defensive catcher, but Yainer Diaz, I think, has upside in that defensive spot and is also very, very good from the plate. So I really expect the Astros to be quite good this season, but I do think there will be one team a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that one team you think is going to get better is my second-place team, and that's the Seattle Mariners. Obviously, pitching out the wazoos over there in Seattle with Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, that's about as good of a top three as you can get in baseball. And they would be my pick to win this division if not for the losses of Eugenio Suarez and Teoscar Hernandez, who both found other homes this offseason. I just don't see enough production from this lineup to overcome the machine that is the Houston Astros. I think it's death taxes and the Houston Astros until proven otherwise for me in the AL West.
While I do have the Mariners winning the division, and it's like you say, they have pitching, and more pitching. This rotation is great. The bullpen is also great. Andres Munoz has been amazing from the bullpen recently for them, and I love this whole stable of pitchers that they have. I think it's going to be good enough to support this offense, which may lag behind a little at times. I love the Jorge Polanco addition, though, and Mitch is back in right field, so big clubhouse guy, good to have him back, and Polanco, I think, provides great protection in the lineup as that switch-hitting threat in front of Julio Rodriguez, so I like that a lot for the Mariners, and I do think they'll come out on top over the course of a full season. On to the AL Central now. I have the Chicago White Sox in 5th place and in full rebuild mode after trading away Dylan Cease. This is just a dumpster fire at this point.
Yeah, I also have the White Sox at 5th. They are one of two teams in my AL East predictions. They get the one-word designation of poverty. They're, like you said, in full rebuild mode around Luis Robert. Obviously, not much around him. Benintendi's also going to be in that outfield, a solid veteran. But beyond that, just not much at all in that lineup. And then with them also trading away Dylan Cease, like we mentioned a bit earlier, that pitching, especially the starting rotation, just looks pretty egregious. You got Mike Clevenger, you've got Kopech, and then Tuki Toussaint as your 3 is pretty bad.
It's a yikes.
He was a guy that was pretty bad even in AA and AAA for the Atlanta Braves. And so having him as your number 3 guy just makes me want to throw up. So I've got the Chicago White Sox finishing in 5th, and I don't think it's going to be very close in the AL Central. I think it's going to be not within 10 games of the next worst team.
Yikes.
And then 4th in the AL Central, I've got the Guardians. They've kind of been very competitive in this division for several years now. I think this is the year that they're due for some regression. First-year manager Stephen Vogt, who was a catcher on the Braves in 2021, World Series champion with the Braves, fun fact. He's a first-year manager, though. I do like Jose Ramirez a lot, but he just does not have much help.
How can
in
you
that
not
lineup.
like J-Ram? He's so much fun.
Super exciting player, but the Shane Bieber injury concerns me a lot. But one bright spot for the Guardians, Tanner Bibby as the AL Rookie of the Year runner-up. He was a very good starter for them last season. I think he builds on that success. I just don't see enough in this Guardians lineup and not enough depth pitching. Stephen Kwan, obviously a good contact hitter, but beyond J-Ram, not much power in that Guardians lineup. So give me them slotted in at the 4th spot in the division.
Yeah, it's this every year with the Guardians, who I also have in 4th place. A lot of upside on the pitching side, and then it's just this lineup is anemic outside of Jose Ramirez as far as power threats. And then for pitching this year, I think they might have lost a step. I know you say the potential of Bibby. Can Tristan McKenzie stay healthy? That's a big question, but your former stalwarts, your guys like Bieber, really hurt and regressing at this point, so I just don't think there's a lot left for them in the tank to be able to compete at the top of this division as these other teams improve. But speaking of improving, I have the Kansas City Royals up to 3rd place in this division. I think Cole Reagans is a very solid one for that rotation. He was very under-the-radar good at the end of last season. I think he's going to impress a lot of people this year. And then, obviously, it starts and ends with Bobby Witt at short for this team, who is just a budding superstar for these Royals.
In third place for me, I've got the Detroit Tigers. I just think that the lineup just does not have much there. Spencer Torkelson, obviously a really good player, but has struggled in terms of average and OPS. Pretty low numbers there. They need to improve a lot at the plate. Javier Baez showed flashes as a Chicago Cub, but has just been a complete dumpster fire for the Tigers so far, especially at the plate. A lot of guys in that lineup with low OPSs, which does not lead to much success in today's Major League Baseball. But they do have a decent rotation in Skubal and Kenta Maeda, especially at the top, and I think that's what elevates them against the Guardians. But I think my second-place team in the Kansas City Royals improve and jump even the Tigers here. You mentioned Bobby Witt Jr. He's my AL MVP sleeper pick this season. Really broke out last season. I think he's the only other guy that has the opportunity to join Ronald Acuna in that 40-70 club. It's going to be tough to get him to 40 home runs, but Bobby Witt Jr. could definitely easily steal 70 bases, in my opinion, with these new rules. Be kind of the Acuna-esque base stealer in the American League. Vinny Pasquantino is another young guy for the Royals in that lineup that is a candidate for a breakout. MJ Melendez, a guy who started out as a catcher and has been playing outfield ever since Salvador Perez has kind of gotten back there, solidified behind the dish. And then I really like their additions as well. Kyle Wright coming in as a starter from the Braves, a guy that before injuries actually had a 20-win season with the Braves in 2022. Obviously missed a lot of time in 2023 and struggled when he did get back. But Brady Singer also is a formidable starter at the top of that rotation as well. And so give me the Royals making the jump all the way up to second in this division.
Yeah, I have the Tigers in second instead of the Royals. The issue with this team is Comerica Park is where hitting goes to die. It is awful to try to hit in such a pitcher's park. And I think that in one way that hurts the Tigers a lot, I think that's part of these lineup struggles, not all of a part of it, but then these pitchers, I think, are really benefiting from it. You talked about Tarek Skubal, who is going to be pretty good, and you have Kenta Maeda behind him, and then can you get Casey Mize back to his previous prospect form? This was a guy that was super highly touted coming out of Auburn. Do you think he can ever build up to be that front of the rotation guy you kind of expected him to be when you drafted him? But then I think this lineup is really poised for a breakout, especially off the backs of Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green. Riley Green had a couple great months this past season, especially hitting for average, and then a plus defender out there too in the outfield. And then Spencer Torkelson, I think, hits the 35 home run mark this year for the Tigers, and those two in your 3 and 4 spot in the lineup, I think, is a pretty good recipe for success, at least in that aspect of this lineup where they haven't had much of it before. Then
yeah, for sure.
Then my division winner is going to be the Minnesota Twins. It's really just down to health with this team. Byron Buxton is made of glass. Carlos Correa's had on and off injury troubles through his career. So I think if this team stays healthy, they're the favorites, but it's a big if for me.
Yeah, give me the Twins as well. One thing I think the Twins need to do to kind of preserve the health of Byron Buxton is give him some run at DH. A lot of his injuries have kind of occurred on freak plays in the outfield and center field. He's an incredible center fielder by all means, but I just think for his long-term health and the long-term success of this team, you got to DH him as much as you can. Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan are going to anchor the top of that rotation. You hate to see, if you're a Twins fan, Sonny Gray skipping town.
You hate to see Kenta Maeda cross division as well.
That's true. But I do think that's still a solid rotation. Carlos Correa, we've seen what he can do. If he can get back to his Houston form, that would be a solid addition, a solid surprise, I'd rather say, for the Twins back in that lineup. And then Royce Lewis, another guy that has shown some flashes. So what you mentioned it all comes down to health for the Twins this season, and a pretty terrible division. I'd say easily the worst division in baseball. at this point.
NL Central's not there anymore. Let's go.
Yeah, I could see any of if my top 4 teams, maybe not the Guardians, but definitely the top 3 teams.
Those top 3
that
are
I
all in with a
predicted
shout for sure.
Could all win this division. Just crazy terrible division.
Yeah. Then finally over to a not terrible division at all in the AL East, one of the more stacked divisions in baseball this season, and someone has to finish last, and for me that's going to be the Boston Red Sox, who have a good young core. I think a lot of these young players have high upside. Bayo on the mound, I think, has pretty good upside. Tristan Cassis, I think, is also pretty good. Jarren Duran has upside, and then Rafael Devers is obviously your big cornerstone on this team. I just don't think there's enough help out of the bullpen and then in your starting rotation to really make this team a contender in this division at all.
Yeah, give me the Red Sox in fifth place in the division as well. They do bring in an influx of youth around Rafael Devers, who's obviously a great player, perennial MVP candidate. They surround him with guys like Vaughn Grissom, Jarren Duran, Tristan Cassis, but I just don't think it's going to be enough, and there's not much pitching in Boston outside of Brian Bayo. And so I think in a stacked division like the AL East, they're going to really struggle. They might still get to around the 75 win mark just because they have enough depth to do that, I feel like, but definitely going to finish 5th in this division for me. And then 4th place, give me the Tampa Bay Rays. The loss of Tyler Glasnow and the terrible situation around Wander Franco, you're obviously not going to have him around this season. I think that's going to really be detrimental to the Rays, not only in terms of talent and production, but just in terms of overall vibes. This team just does not have the same vibes, if that makes sense, as they did when they had Wander Franco. Just was a budding young star, super exciting player to watch. Not going to have him or Tyler Glasnow, who went over to the Dodgers in the offseason.
Well, Glasnow was injured so much anyway, it felt like they were playing without him a lot of the time, but it still is a big loss for them.
Yeah, for sure, but Randy Arozarena still in that lineup, Yandy Diaz, they're going to be enough to keep this lineup afloat, at least ahead of the Red Sox for me. They didn't have any overwhelming signings this offseason, and that's to be expected with their low payroll. And then obviously with the loss of Glasnow, once again, you're going to need guys like Zach Eflin to step up pitching-wise. But yeah, give me Tampa to regress a little bit and finish in 4th.
I also have Tampa in 4th, and it's just not enough quality depth in that rotation or the bullpen for me. And then this lineup outside of Arozarena and Yandy Diaz, Isaac Paredes has shown flashes, but then I don't know how much depth you have there either. Then obviously the horrible Wander Franco stuff is just bad for this team all around, and clubhouse morale, you have to say as well. It's just not something that's going to be easy to recover from this entire organization. But we know the Rays, I think there's probably 80% chance they trade for a random 20-year-old starter at the deadline who just starts and becomes healthy Jacob deGrom. So you never know with these guys. They always seem to have a shrewd front office and are good at making moves. So I don't think you can ever really count them out. But as for right now, I have them in 4th. Then the Blue Jays are who I have in 3rd place, and it's as simple as this. They signed Joey Votto, and he's already hit a home run in his first ever plate appearance on the first pitch he ever saw. So Joey Votto is carrying the Blue Jays to a playoff appearance. Yes, the hometown kid. Actually, they're not going to the playoffs. I regret to inform you Blue Jays fans, you're not going to the playoffs. But I like this rotation in all seriousness. Kevin Gausman is great. He's going to remain great. Then Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr., 2 good players in the lineup as well. This team has a lot of high-end star power, but they just can never quite seem to put it together, and I think that's going to continue to be the case.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I've also got the Blue Jays slotted in at that 3rd spot. Kevin Gausman, one of the best starters in the American League, and then a lot of depth in that rotation with Chris Bassett, Barrios, Kikuchi. I love that rotation a lot. I think it's really deep, and the lineup has a lot of potential with guys like Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr., George Springer. I just don't think it's enough to propel them ahead of teams like the Orioles or the Yankees, who I think are just going to be juggernauts in the AL East. I think the Yankees and Orioles are the best 2 teams in the American League, and I've actually got the Orioles coming in at number 2 in the division. I love their future. I just don't trust their young pitching quite yet. They have a little bit of a lack of star power. Their pitching is obviously great with Corbin Burnes.
Lack of star power? come on.
Corbin Burns and Grayson Rodriguez, but the health
Is Adley
situation.
Rutschman not a star? Does he not get star credit?
Yeah, I don't think one star is going to do much for you for Baltimore. I don't see any other guys.
I think you're going to end up with a lot of stars on that team by the end of the year. Between Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, I think Cedric Mullins is going to continue to improve. Then Corbin Burns is a bona fide star at this point. You never know what you're going to get out of like a Ryan Mountcastle. I think this this team is a lot better than you're giving them credit for, even at number 2.
Yeah, I don't see it yet for the Orioles. Beyond Burns and Grayson Rodriguez, you've got John Means and Kyle Bradish with dealing with some health issues, and I just think obviously the team that I'm leaving out that I'll get to in just a bit is just going to be too much.
Well, I have that team in second. It's the Yankees. It is short porch season in New York, though, with Juan Soto at the plate for them, and then Aaron Judge is going to do Aaron Judge things. I think Juan Soto in the 3 and Juan Soto in the 2 and Aaron Judge in the 3 is a lethal top of the lineup. Aaron Judge finally getting some protection in that lineup. And then the Garrett Cole injury is obviously huge for the Yankees. I think that can get them off to a slow start for this season, and I think that's really where the Orioles are going to jump ahead. And I think those teams are so equal when both healthy that the Orioles are going to have enough to get over the line first in this division. I love this rotation, especially with the addition of Corbin Burns, although the bullpen does have some issues. Felix Bautista being out for the full season is a massive blow. I know you've picked up Craig Kimbrell to try to rectify that, but he's just not Felix Bautista. Bautista is a next-level closer, probably one of the top 5 in the MLB, so to lose a guy like that is big, but I still think this team is good enough to win the division over the course of the year.
Yeah, and obviously give me the Yankees to win the division. I think the addition of Soto is going to prove monumental for this team. Soto, my favorite player outside of a Braves uniform in Major League Baseball. I think he's going to hit 50 bombs this season. I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I can see that.
Incredibly short porch there over at Yankee Stadium, and I think he's just going to feast on that. I think a lot of his what would have been fly ball outs in other ballparks are just going to be home runs at Yankee Stadium, and obviously he crushes the ball a lot at other times, and so those are obviously going to go over the wall as well. Give me Soto for a 50 bomb season, maybe an AL MVP candidate even. You're going to have 2 AL MVP candidates in there with he and Judge. I think that's just a lethal combination. And then just a lot of other guys that can hit for average on that team in LeMahieu and Volpe, and just a lot of pieces I like for the Yankees. Obviously, as you mentioned, Garrett Cole starting the season on the injured list is going to be tough for them. But I love the pickup of Marcus Stroman. He's obviously not really a needle pusher in terms of front of your rotation, but he's a solid 4 behind Nestor Cortez and Carlos Rodon. I think Rodon's going to take a step this season, as he was a little disappointing for the Yankees last season. But Nestor Cortez, we've seen what he can do at times, and I really like this team as a whole. Give me the Yankees to win the AL East.
Yeah, I definitely think they're good. I just think the Orioles are better for sure. And then finally, we have our postseason bracket predictions for the American League this year. I have my division winners, obviously, and the 1 is the Orioles, and the 2 is the Mariners out of the AL West, and then the worst division winner, I think, will be the Twins. Then as far as my wild cards, I think the Astros are the best non-division winner. They slot in at 4, followed very closely behind, I think, by the Yankees at 5, and then give me the Texas Rangers to make it back in the 6 to try to go back-to-back this year.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be the Yankees in the 1 spot, Astros in the 2 slot, Minnesota in the 3 spot as the worst division winner. Give me the Orioles as the first wild card. I do think the Yankees and Orioles are going to both win 100 games this season, kind of like when the Dodgers and Giants both did a few years back. But obviously the Orioles can't be slotted for me any higher than the 2 division winners, and then rounding out my playoffs or postseason, give me the Mariners at 5 and the Rangers at 6.
Yeah, I like how we have the same 6 teams, just in different orders. So we think we have a pretty good feel for who the top teams in the AL are going to be this year. It's just a matter of what order they end up in. And then we'll touch on college baseball for a couple minutes here at the end, just because I want to talk about Florida, and I assume you want to talk about Clemson after the weekend that they've had. So for me, I this Florida team, I would love for them to get some pitching. The pitching is a disaster right now outside of Jack Caglione, but they were able to get a series win over Texas A&M this weekend, taking 2 out of 3 for a team that came into that series undefeated. So for a Gators team that's been up and down so far to start the season, out of conference play, absolutely massive way to start SEC play. And then a different kind of statement made by my Auburn Tigers, who got swept by Vanderbilt on the road. And those games were not particularly close, finishing 11-1, 13-5, and 9-6 in games where this Auburn pitching staff really showed that it still has a ways to go, especially out of the bullpen. So I'm very worried for them, especially since their next SEC series next weekend is versus Red Hot Arkansas.
Yeah, definitely going to be a tough challenge for Florida. Over here in Clemson, my squad went on the road to Durham this weekend, took 2 out of 3 against the number 3 ranked Duke Blue Devils. Lost the Friday game in a game that honestly I expected to lose, with the Tigers throwing Austin Gordon. Addison's his little brother that actually plays football and baseball with my cousin that goes to Myrtle Beach High School. Austin Gordon still coming back from a shoulder injury, just kind of trying to get stretched back out, and Tigers did put some faith into him on Friday night, running him out there. He gave up 5 runs in 4 innings, and ultimately Duke was only able to score 5, but Clemson was shut down in that game, only scoring 2 runs, and then really bouncing back in the past 2 days, in the last 2 games of the season, of the series. I cannot talk right now. This is what filming a 1-hour podcast will do. Really bouncing back on Saturday and Sunday. Tristan Bassetta really emerging for the Tigers as kind of this year's version of Billy Amick. He's a guy that didn't start the season in the lineup, but you just can't keep him out of the lineup now. His grand slam today proved the difference for Clemson, who was able to hold off a Duke rally late to win 8-7 in extra innings, and a great win for Eric Bakich and this Clemson team, who I think is going to make some noise this season and hopefully get back to Omaha for the first time since 2010.
Yeah, this series for me was super intriguing, as in my eyes, these are the 2 teams in the ACC that have the best chance to challenge Wake Forest this season. I think the Demon Deacons obviously come in as a favorite for that league, but don't sleep on the Blue Devils or the Tigers come tournament time later this season, and a huge series win for Clemson overall. But that is it for this episode of SM Sports Radio. Thank y'all for tuning in, and we will be back actually later today with our big March Madness bracket reveal special, so tune into that as well.